Any members of the public? I'm not sure. Oh yes, of course we have. Good morning, nice to see you as always. And so nice to be getting underway this morning. So welcome to you all. No mai haramai. We are streaming, thank you. We are streaming live this morning. So please, when you do speak, pull your microphones into you and speak up. We are well heard from those watching from afar, and to those who are watching the live streaming, welcome to our Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting this morning, the 15th of April 2021. I'd also, of course, like to welcome you, Potawa Pisini Tule. Welcome. It's nice to have you back, sitting here at this table, bringing your wisdom, your experience, and I dare say your continued forthright views. So nice to have you back with us at the table. No mai haramai, welcome. Please put your mobile phones, switch them off, preferably off the table. And we will be taking, obviously I'll give some time for clearing urgent messages, probably a break around 11 o'clock and lunch about 1 o'clock. We might hopefully be finished by 1, so that would be the aim this morning. That would be the aim. I'd like to ask, please, Eugene, Mr. Berryman-Kemp, if he could open our meeting. Thank you. Kia ora.
Yes, kia ora, Madam Chair. He mihi ni wea tēnei I tēnei ata ki te tautoko ngā kaupapa I tēnei wā nei, nō reira he karaki e tīmatanga. Our opening prayer, ka noi tātou, let us pray. E te atua kaharawa, ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mātauranga. Manaki tia mai mātou, wau pononga ne e tēnei wā, e mahi nei ia mātou mahi, o te painga o ngā tangata, o te kanuhira o ngā rota o Rotorua. Takua mai kia tai te rangamarie ki runga I a mātou I ngā wā katoa. Ko ihu karaiti hoku tō mātou ariki. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And I was rather remiss in not actually extending the welcome to our CEO and to our staff. It's really important that we recognise the work that they do on our behalf. So no mai haramai to you all. Thank you. Now, thank you, Eugene, for our karakia this morning. Apologies, please. Any apologies? We're all present. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you, Ramesh.
Madam Chair, I just would request an early departure at maybe midday today for an appointment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Noted. Declarations of interest. Carl, thank you. We have the... Oh, sorry, where's it? Oh, there we go. Oh, yes, sorry, out of order already. Urgent items, not on the agenda. Any urgent items? Carl, thank you very much. So we have our first presentation, agenda item number 5, and it's the Waikato Regional Council giving us a brief overview of the long-term plan, their long-term plan 2021 to 2031. And we have members of the council here, I understand, to do that presentation. So I will let you introduce yourselves, but most welcome this morning. Nice to have you here. Kia ora.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou. Thank you very much for inviting us here today. I'm Kathy White. I'm the Regional Councillor for Topo, Rotorua. This is my 3rd term. I know some of you from meetings in previous terms, but some of you are new to me, so I'm very pleased to meet you today. I'm joined by 2 staff today, and we have Nicole here and we have Tracy. You might like to introduce yourselves as to what your roles are.
Thanks, Kathy. So my name's Nicole Hubbard. I am the Corporate Planning Manager at Waikato Regional Council, so responsible for bringing together the long-term plan.
Kia ora tātou. Many familiar faces, a place I've spent many hours this room. So Tracy May, Director Science and Strategy. Kia ora.
Yeah, we're very pleased to be here today. I know you probably see a lot more of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. Of course, part of your area is the Waikato Regional Council, and it's really good to be able to come and talk to you about some of the proposals that we have for the long-term plan. We have developed a strategy. We developed a strategy last year, and that was for the next 10 years. The strategy identifies 6 strategic priorities, and those are the things that we're going to talk to you a little bit more about today. Our long-term plan consultation is open now, and it's open until the 30th of April. There are a number of things that we particularly want to highlight to you because they have impact specifically on you. And we do have a particular endeavour to work along with others to achieve outcomes that are going to benefit us all. And we have some key areas of focus which we want to talk to you about. That we aren't actually talking about everything that's in our long-term plan. So there are some things that we'll mention at the end that we particularly want your input on as well. We're also consulting on the regional pest management plan at the moment, and that's something that we'd also like you to put some attention to. So this is actually more a strategic adjustment rather than big ticket changes. So one of the things that we really want to draw to your attention is there's quite a few things coming towards us from central government at the moment. A lot of new legislation and not a lot of new environmental standards and national policy statements. And a lot of the focus that we're putting on in this long-term plan is on implementing those things. We had quite a few unexpected challenges, as I'm sure you did, with COVID-19 last year. So there were some things that we did. We had a net zero rates revenue increase in the 2020-21 annual plan. And yeah, we wanted to focus this time in our long-term plan on some things which are specifically to do with water and specifically to do with biodiversity, etc. So I'd just like to talk to you a little bit more about that today.
Folks, I'll just lead off with our response to healthy waterways. So like you good selves who are struggling with a number of unfunded mandates from central government, particularly around free water space, which will be a challenge, we've got some responsibilities around Te Mana o Te Wai, maintaining the quality of our freshwater bodies, so that's throughout the entire region. As Councillor White said, you probably don't see our faces as much as you see Bay of Plenty Regional Council, but the areas of your rohe that we have some responsibility over are some of the Mamaku Plateau, and then from Waitapu down Waikiti down to about Mihi Valley, the Mihi Stream are the areas that we're looking at, and also around Atiamuri, those areas there. So for us, we've got some significant responsibilities around managing fresh water, around developing some policies around that. We are not consulting on this through our long-term plan because much like some things you've got from central government, we can't opt out. But we did want to highlight that it's definitely in there. It's about $2 million per annum to refresh some of our policies and some of our implementation and regulatory processes. So we just want to highlight it, but say, look, we're not going out, we're not saying to people, do you want us to do this or not? Because it's something we must do. What we've got here is just a couple of slides. These are the proposed rates increases across the region. So overall, 70% of our region's ratepayers will be paying less than $50. And Nicole? $50 increase, in rates, and then the median increase for Rotorua is around that $16. Now this is median. There's the whole graph, so you'll see some people will be paying more and some people will be paying less, but that's where we're at. I would say it is skewed a little bit because of those geographic areas. They are predominantly rural areas, so we're only bearing that in mind. Nicole?
Thanks, Tracy. So in our plan we have 8 proposals that we are consulting on, so they're just listed up on the screen there, but we'll go through each of those individually now and just talk about those proposals and what feedback we're seeking.
Our first proposal is around protecting our biodiversity. We know you're doing some good work through your district plan for those significant natural areas. Biodiversity is very important in this region. We've got a significant program coming at us with the National Policy Statement of Indigenous Biodiversity. The options we're consulting on, because we've got all of this freshwater work coming at us, there was a recommendation to defer our biodiversity work to year 2 of the LTP. Council has asked us to go and consult with the community whether they would like that to be brought on as year 1 or brought on as year 2. So essentially that's what we're going to consult about. It does mean an increase in rates in year 1 because of the additional staff that will need to do some of that work.
Thanks, Tracy. So our second proposal is around the Sustainable Home Scheme. So obviously we want everyone within the Waikato to have a healthy home to live in, a warm, healthy home. And this scheme is about our council taking on borrowing to lend to ratepayers in order to do sustainable improvements to their homes. So those are things like water tank installations, insulation, double glazing, heating, ventilation. A voluntary targeted rate would be placed on the property, and that would be calculated as being paid off over 10 years, and ratepayers would actually need to demonstrate that they had a good credit rating and rates payment history to be able to be eligible to opt into the scheme. We haven't budgeted for this yet. We're just going out and saying, do you want us to do this or not? We have looked at how much debt we would potentially need to take on if people were keen on this scheme, and we think that could be in the order of 35 million. It's designed to be cost neutral to those, to all of ratepayers, apart from those that obviously opt into the scheme. They would be paying for the cost of it. I understand that Hawke's Bay Regional Council has this, so you might be familiar anyway with a similar scheme, and that's what we've modelled our scheme off.
Now, a lot of you will be familiar with the Lake Topo Protection Project. It's been going on for quite a long time, looking at something like a decade. So in the early 2000s, we worked with Topo District Council and the Crown to reduce the amount of nitrogen which was entering Lake Topo. As part of the work, the Lake Topo Protection Trust was established, and the trust entered into 27 landowner agreements to reduce the amount of nitrogen that they were discharging on their land, which ultimately led to reduced nitrogen leaching into the lake. So the trust has fulfilled its initial purpose. It was only ever intended to have a limited life, and the current arrangements are due to end in June 2021. So we now need a decision to be made in terms of who should oversee the landowner agreements in the future. Waikato Regional Council is currently doing the monitoring of plantings, etc. So we have agreed to consult jointly with Topo District Council on this issue, and we have a number of things that are mentioned in this particular, in the document on page 13. We just wanted to draw your attention to a few things. Waikato Regional Council has agreed that we will cap our contribution to this project at 50% of the lowest cost option. Now, the lowest cost option is actually bringing the management of this project in-house to one of the councils, either Topo District Council or Waikato Regional Council. So that option is option number 2. If people decide that they want to retain the trust, the remaining funding would be provided by Topo District Council. So some of the other things to bear in mind is that the project itself is in a maintenance phase now. There's quite a lot less work to do than there was previously, and there are issues to look at in terms of governance and management. But I know that you have similar management of nitrogen within your own area, and it would be useful for you to have a think about what you do and how you think the management and governance could best be looked at in the future.
This proposal, I'll just kind of gloss over this one a little bit as it doesn't actually impact on Rotorua ratepayers. So we have the Tahuia service that has started between Hamilton and Auckland. Hamilton ratepayers pay for that service. There will be a small contribution from Waikato District. We're looking to the future for this service and thinking about what improvements we need to make sure that it's a success in the long term. So looking in year 3 that we put on an additional interpeak service, and also looking at options for improving the rolling stock, so locomotives and carriages. We've done lots of work on this proposal in conjunction with central government, so they are picking up a large portion of the bill for us. But we obviously want that to continue beyond the 5-year trial that is currently going at the moment.
Okay, so the next one, this is actually to do with regional economic development funding. The council currently provides funding of $300,000 per annum to Te Waka, which is the Waikato's Regional Economic Development Agency. It's a business-led organisation that's set up to drive economic growth in the Waikato. So the proposal is that we provide additional funding support to Te Waka for the next 3 years in order to help them achieve their objectives faster. So the proposal is to increase the amount to $750,000 per year. The proposal suggests increasing it only for 3 years, and it's subject to an accountability framework to ensure agreed outcomes are achieved. So we had previously funded Te Waka through general rates, but through this proposal we're recommending that the funding comes from returns we get from our investment fund. And now this is something that that is important that you realise. That money would normally go into our regional development fund, which is a contestable fund for regionally significant projects. So it does mean that if we increase the funding to our regional economic development body Te Waka, that there would be less money available in the fund for potential applications in the short term from the Regional Development Fund.
Proposal 7, and for those of you who are eagle eyes, we have not hidden anything by way of not having Proposal 6, but it relates to a drain reorganisation at Te Aroha. Didn't think you'd want to submit on that. You can if you'd like. So these are our rates, remission and postponement policies, very similar to what you all have. We have 3 policies we're consulting on. One is to do with proximity to public transport stop in Hamilton. The second one is our rates remission for financial hardship. We included a number of additional criteria through COVID, and as our response to COVID, we're wanting to embed those into our financial hardship rates remission policy. One thing we are really keen to have conversations with yourself about is we know you will have a number of folk in the community who come and see you about rates remission and hardship. We think there's a really good way we can perhaps connect up those folk who are coming in here who probably don't know to come and see us as well. So actually working in a bit more of an integrated fashion, I think that would be incredibly beneficial for those folk who are experiencing that hardship. And thirdly, our council has asked us to have a look at our rates remission for biodiversity. We have a policy, we've had a policy for a number of years that looks at rates remission for people who will protect some Indigenous biodiversity. Now, we've had very little uptake of that and very little ability of people to get through the criteria. So we have made some amendments. We've also been asked to go out and be a bit more proactive in the promotion, but also do some targeted consultation with key landowners. Proposal 8, again, like yourselves, we always look at our cost recovery charges for consent holders. So there are some changes. You do hold, I think, some consents with us, so it will be something that you'll need to take a look at. In terms of, we're not asking for more money from everybody. We just know the amount of money we get. We've done quite a piece of extensive work to determine how we cut that pie and to make sure it's equitable, and that those consent holders who might be causing more impact are actually the ones who are paying equitably in that regard. Nicole?
So obviously we're not asking for feedback on everything, as you won't be through your 10-year plan as well, but we have outlined in our document, which I've got a number of copies I'll leave here so you can have a flick through that if you like, on some of the other work that we are doing. Just wanted to highlight one of the top bullet point on the slide there is around our infrastructure. So obviously that's a large part of our budget, and continuing to maintain, replace and renew that infrastructure is really important. And then sitting alongside that, there is some additional information in the document around some of the shovel-ready funding that we received in order to improve some of that infrastructure. Our council also made a decision to contribute $50,000 per annum for 3 years to our rural trust support. It was from council's prior year surplus. Councillors support the work that our staff do with the trust to support rural people and farming families. So that's just an extra that we have popped in this time. But yeah, there's more information on all of those in the document. So you can have your say. There are a number of ways, either online, via post and via email. Consultation closes on the 30th of April, and hopefully we'll have a submission from you.
We are wanting, I'm really impressed. Walking in, gosh, it looks fantastic. I have to say the refurbishment that's been done just makes it look like a totally new building. We will be in about three weeks shifting into a new building in town in the CBD in Hamilton, so it's going to be interesting. About 500 of us shifting over a 3-week period, so somebody's bound to lose their highlighters, but next time you visit us, hopefully, and you will come and visit us, we will be in town in the CBD, so we're really looking forward to it. Just one more minute to talk about, we are also consulting on our regional pest management plan, so animal and plant pests, it's out at the moment. It's always a document that gets a high degree of interaction from our rural communities. We would like some of our urban folk to really look at this, really understand what some of the issues are. Council-wide has been on the working party of our councillors who have put this document out. Please have a look at it. It is important because many of these incursions of weeds and pests do have significant economic and social impacts. And that is us. Kathy, did you just want to close?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if anybody had any questions.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you so much. It's really, it's great to be able to hear what another authority is doing, and it's a little bit of comparisons in my head on a couple of things there, but thank you so much for your presentation this morning. I am going to allow possibly about 10 minutes for questions, and so please make them relevant to the presentation that you've heard, and make them succinct, councillors. Thank you. Yes, Your Worship.
Welcome, and nice to see you here. Just the synergies with us working with our regional council. Are you co-investing or being asked to co-invest in sewage scheme or drinking water upgrades from your economic development fund? That's one question. And the other is about the wider regional sports amenities. I remember the time the velodrome was interesting in Cambridge, but there could be the opportunity to develop some other wider regional sports facilities. Is that still part of your commitment to investment?
We haven't had any proposals in terms of sporting facilities. Through our Regional Development Fund, people could actually put in a proposal for something like that. The Regional Development Fund is specifically designed to benefit projects which are cross boundaries. and which support employment, etc., and also quite a lot of green growth. So it is possible to put in a proposal to do with something like that through the Regional Development Fund, but Tracy might be able to comment on that further. Your Worship, in regard to the sewerage upgrades and infrastructure funding, we haven't had any applications for that, and our fund is quite different to how Bay of Plenty Regional Council's fund operates, but it's something that we know with the NES drinking water and Three Waters that we're likely to come under a bit of pressure on that.
Thank you. Mr. Vesini Tule.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Kia ora whānau, kia ora tātou. I loved your presentation. I picked up, you mentioned mana o te wai, so really would like to acknowledge the adoption of the kaupapa. But also you said there was no wider consultation. So I'm just thinking, how do you maintain or ensure mana whenua voice during this process?
We weren't going out to consult with people to say, should we or shouldn't we, because we know we must. So in terms of Te Mana o Te Wai and our responsibilities under the MPS freshwater management, that is a whole different consultation and engagement process. I've had some preliminary conversations with my friend here to my right, Eugene, in terms of how we will do that, how iwi would like to be involved and what that looks like to iwi, and some of the challenges, because capability and capacity is going to be our biggest challenge we face in that space. But in terms of the LTP, we have consulted with all, engaged with all iwi, and are having conversations with them on this.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, and then Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation, and good to see you again, Tracy. The question I have is with regard to geothermal investment. Would you mind giving us a minute on just where you're at with that? I understand it's progressing really well.
With respect to geothermal, look, we're not looking to change any policies or plans, which is unusual in our business, because we have a very good, very strong structure that people provides them with certainty when they want to develop or not. We have processed a number of significant resource consents lately that have enabled development of fields to occur, and we're continuing with our research program really to understand the importance of those fields first and foremost, and then their value from a social, economic or environmental perspective. It is not an area where we have really looked in any way, shape or form at our investment in it. It's pretty much business as usual in that area. That's a fair comment, isn't it, Councillor? Yes. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, good morning to the team. Hope you had a lovely drive through all the roadworks this morning, coming all the way up from Hamilton, then into Rotorua. Thank you. My question is around slide 1, if I can get that slide 1, around the principal ethos of how Waikato Regional Council is going to operate on. It was regarding, I think it was one of the first slides that came up, and
perhaps you could ask a question.
Yeah, it's around the long-term plan is one of the strategic adjustments rather than big tickets, so we will keep our costs down for our ratepayers. Regarding that, I mean, with rising costs and climate change and everything happening, how is it sustainable to achieve those? And is that the way, is that for the next few years? Or how are we going to achieve something like that and still keep to the demands of what the ratepayers want?
Well, we are trying to keep costs down because we do realise that we need to bear in mind the affordability issue. There are quite a few things, for instance, the water, the National Environmental Standard and the National Policy Statement and our own Healthy Rivers plan change. There are a lot of things like that which actually require the money to be spent. So, for instance, the water side of things accounts for about 2% of our rates increase. So there are some things that we really don't have any choice about spending that money. But I guess in terms of the other things, we can look at what we want to prioritise. So, for instance, in terms of climate change things, we are doing some research at the moment on peat soils, because that's an area where we can actually make a difference in terms of greenhouse gases. So I do understand what you're saying. It is quite difficult to, when we do need to spend money on certain things, but there are perhaps some projects that we have chosen to spend less money on. And there are also some projects which are in there which we've had quite a lot of funding from the government, so quite a lot of leveraged funding. For instance, Te Huia, that's like 3/4 of the cost has been the train service. That one has been mainly paid for by central government and Hamilton City Council, for instance. So yes, we have had to pick and choose what we spend our money on, and we'd like to actually hear from you if you think we haven't got that right.
Thank you. I'm moving on for that. Two more. For that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you, and welcome Councillor White and also Nicole and Tracy. Thank you very much for your presentation. The question that I have this morning is around the Sustainable Home Schemes. I want to really commend you, first of all, for bringing that in as part of your long-term plan and providing that funding that is available for people to lend and then return on a 10-year scheme. The question I do have was just a little concern around the requirement of a credit history. We know that housing is a significant issue for our wider region, but we know that healthy homes as well is also a very significant issue. So we want to ensure that families that need the funding or need the support to upgrade their home to a healthy home will be very important. So just that question around how can we ensure that the Sustainable Home Scheme will be equitable and those who may need it, who also may unfortunately not have a good credit history, are able to still access some help or funding. And if I can give an example, the Rotorua Lakes Council and also the Bay of Plenty Regional Council have gone through sustainability options in the past, which is an independent home assessment process where someone will go into the home, inform the family that this is what you can do to create good ventilation, insulation, or reduce mould as an example. It's a free service for them and it costs us $75,000 a year, and we had hundreds of homes across our region.
Do you have a question, please? Do you have a question?
Yes, so
Thank
just
you.
how can we ensure that in the Waikato region as well, we're able to have that available for families?
Perhaps I can take this one. The credit history is important. It links back to a recent Office of the Auditor General comment made around a similar initiative that Auckland Council were running, and it's really making sure that we're not, by assisting people to have healthy homes, we're not putting them more in debt. So the credit history is important. As with any lending operation, you want to make sure people can pay it back, and what we're wanting to do is, should those people be successful, we don't want to create more money than they're able to pay back, but there are options within that, so we can make whatever assistance we want to give commensurate with their ability to pay back and over what period. It is something we are working through. We're taking on all comments, questions, observations, so you gave us some useful other tools there that we haven't looked at. But it is important, and the Audit of the Officer General was very specific in saying you must lend money to people knowing they're able to pay it back.
Mr. Berryman-Kim?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and yes, morena koutou. Perhaps to provide a wee bit of context with for this committee, within my day job, I work predominantly with Waikato Regional Council in terms of Te Arawa's interests in the restoration of the Waikato River. But my question, and it's a two-part one, I'm interested if you have an idea of either the land area or the population of Waikato Regional Council within the Rotorua Lakes Council rohi. And I'm asking that because I see a number of these proposals here, and I think that they're great, the sustainable homes, regional economic development, rates remission, but I don't think there's a physical presence of Waikato Regional Council within the Rotorua district. So I'm interested to know, for the proportion of our population within the Rotorua district for whom they fall under Waikato Regional Council, how do they engage and access these programs if there's no physical presence locally for them to engage with?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a very good point in terms of population. I know it's less than 6,000. The land area, it's probably more than we all think it is. I'd say it would be about a third of the district from memory. But very good point in terms of our visibility in this area.
Thank you. And I'll give a question to Mrs. Trapper. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, guys, for coming along. As the only person that's sitting around council table that actually lives in the Waikato Regional Council area, I would have been very annoyed if I hadn't been able to ask a question. One of them is around Proposal 3, so I'll keep it really brief to just Proposal 3. One of the questions was, why is there a one-year agreement that you are looking at to see what the most efficient and cost-effective way is to manage the Lake Topo catchment? Because my understanding is that Regional Council are mandated to look after land and water and air, and Lake Topo feeds the Waikato River and is actually your essential te manawa tuai, basically, and that's where healthy rivers start. And I would have thought that Regional Council would have been picking this up and monitoring and managing in a far better way. So I want to know why you've got a one-year term and, you know, what's the rationale behind that?
Mm-hmm. Oh. I think the thing is that not everybody is in agreement about the best way to move forward in terms of governance and management of the project. So where the trust is supposed to come to an end in June 2021, there are a number of people in the joint committee who have asked for an extension to the trust. We've already had one extension to the trust. And there has been a request for another extension. But we do also, Council did want to build into the decision that we make that we actually have a good review of it after the first year. The difficulty is that there are a lot of reasons why it might make sense from a cost perspective to actually bring it in-house to be managed by one of the councils. However, there are a lot of people who would like to retain the trust, and the trust has obviously been a very important part of the journey. The trust itself is a CCO, and so obviously there are additional costs. You know, when you have a look at the costs there, it's approximately $100,000 a year more to continue with the trust than it would be to bring it in-house. So I guess our council actually put the stipulation in there that they wanted a chance to actually have a look at it again in a year's time. I don't know whether Tracy wants to make any comment about that, but really at this stage, we're wanting to hear from the public as to what their preference would be, what they think needs to happen moving forward. We deliberately put the 50% cap on the contribution there so that it actually enables the possibility that if for instance, the Topo ratepayers would prefer to actually continue with the trust, and they're happy to actually sustain the additional costs, that option is there open to them. I don't know whether I've completely answered your question, Shirley, but can you add anything extra to that, Tracy?
No, just the key matter that I would add is this isn't the only initiative that we have with respect to managing the waters of and the catchment of Lake Topo and the start of the Waikato River. This is a mechanism that's been set up. We want to make sure that the outputs of the mechanism are durable, but as Councillor White has said, we need to do something new, but make sure that if there is an opportunity to make improvements and refinements, to give ourselves a 12-month review. So it's definitely, please do not take the message it's only for 12 months.
No, it's not. It's not just for 12 months. In actual fact, these agreements are in perpetuity. So we are definitely going to be managing these landowner agreements and the compliance of the plantings forever. That won't change. I think that's a really important thing to remember. And we are committed that regardless of which option we end up with, whether it gets taken in-house by a council or whether it continues to be managed by the trust, we're determined that the level of service will remain the same.
Thank you. Look, thank you very much for coming along this morning and presenting to us, and I do hope that you'll get many, many submissions on your long-term plan. So thank you very much. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us here today. We're really grateful.
Thank you. So, councillors, we'll go to our item on the agenda, which is the confirmation of our minutes, the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting minutes of the 11th of March 2021. I have a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Are there any changes, amendments before I put the motion? No. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Carried. The Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee hearing minutes of the 11th of March 2021, the draft open space level of service policy. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Mr. Thomas and Mr. Berriman-Kemp. So before I put that, are there any changes, amendments? No. Otherwise, I'll put that the minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting hearing minutes of the 11th of March 2021 draft open space level of service policy be confirmed as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Carried. So item 7, deliberations and adoption of the open space level of service policy. Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Mr. Thomas and Councillor Yates. Thank you. I'll put that motion that be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, team. Kia ora. And view the report for us. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just take a couple of minutes just to set a bit of context. And we've got Steph Kelly here, obviously our Recreation Planner Strategic Advisor, who's been involved with this process all the way through, and Jocelyn as well. So as you'll recall, we've been developing this policy for some period of time, open space level of service policy, and we really, we need this to inform requirements for open space with our growing city. Certainly in previous years, we haven't had quite such a need, but certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, things have been changing, and we've really recognised the need for this. It's also important to assess what we've got, make sure our open space is fit for purpose. It's integrated with our other activities and plans, and it's maintained and managed appropriately. The policy sets standards for the quality, quantity, accessibility and functionality of our open spaces. So we developed the draft, brought it in front of this committee in October last year. Then it was adopted as a draft by the committee and the council, subsequently the council, and we went through the public consultation process associated with that policy. We had 8 submissions, and then at our last meeting, you'll recall, we had the hearing with 3 submitters that were heard. We've done a staff assessment of those submissions and come through with some recommendations for the policy. And we're basically here before you today to take any questions that you may have on the interpretation of that and the recommendations and the policy for adoption. So thank you.
Councillors, do we have any questions? Mr. Berriman-Kemp?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thank you for the report. My question in particular, and referring to the policy, page 21, really, I'm interested in understanding the definition of open space includes land gifted for reserve purposes. One of the questions is, what's the process for if the use of land that has been gifted or has been accessed through a way like public works or something has been changed? What's the process to engage with mana whenua about that land? So I'm just interested to know more about how that process works. And I guess, apologies, I'm not really up to speed with this, but for instance, I know during the hearings there's quite a bit of heat about the Springfield Golf Course. So if the use of the Springfield Golf Course is changed from what it is now to a different open space thing, does that trigger a process in terms of engagement with mana whenua? How does that work?
The policy specifically identifies gifted lands because we have a number of protocols, you know, in particular with Ngāti Whakāui around the gifted reserves. And certainly any activity on those reserves or changes with those gifted reserves, we have a strong relationship with mana whenua, and I mean we have protocol committee meetings regularly to understand that situation. For other lands, any significant change to any other land also has to go through a public consultation process. If it's a significant change that's a deviation from a reserve management plan, then it would go through a process under the Reserves Act to deal with that, which would be public consultation as well as clearly mana whenua consultation.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you.
With regard to this gifted reserves, that my particular question relates to bringing a stream back to the cemetery.
Please, Councillor Bentley, we are hearing you. So if it's not going, I think there are certainly people watching and...
Try this.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My particular area of interest is in the land that was gifted for cemeteries down off the Paringa stream, which has several businesses being divided up into 2-acre blocks, which council presently collects a reasonable amount of income from. As it was gifted by Ngāti Whakāui, should we not be discussing back to them that should they not be receiving the revenue from that land, which was, as I say, originally gifted as cemetery?
It's a good question. The situation, from my understanding with that land, is that it's not, you know, it was sort of, I think we're getting off the policy topic a little bit here, but the situation with that is that, you know, we're working, and we have been working with Ngāti Whakāui on understanding the land status report for that piece of land. And I suppose it's an example of where any sort of change that might be considered, some of the processes that need to be run through in terms of fully understanding what it is. There is some history there that needs to be confirmed and checked through with Ngāti Whakāui before any decision on the future of that land is made.
And I dare say that Ngāti Whakāui, they're eyeing well constantly. So thank you. Mr. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. When I was reading page 32, which has got the open space categories and provision metrics guideline, you describe in that table the type of categories that you use, their functions, examples, indicative amenities, and provisional metrics. Very interesting, because it reveals the way that we think about open spaces, how we categorise, subcategorise. And I noticed that there was relatively little reference to the very intense affiliation that different sporting codes and clubs have with particular grounds and buildings. And I wonder if thought could be given to that very intense nature of affiliation that these groups have. because I don't think that dimension is adequately represented in this classification scheme. Through you, thank you.
This is, yes. Yes, it is a policy, that's right. That's what we're looking at. Thank you, Your Worship.
Well, a comment really. 1.2 about integrated planning. I'm very pleased to see that in the policy. When we went on a Frocks on Bikes ride, I saw masses of spaces that has potential use for neighbourhood development and how it could fit into the long-term plan. So well done for putting that in there. I didn't realise there was so much land that's not really utilised at the moment that could be used for community assets, amenity and use, like gardens and all sorts of things that we could involve the community hubs in. So I'm very pleased to see that in there. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you, clarification on the definition on page 21. So I read through the scope and what the policy applies to, but the last part of the definition says it excludes exclusive leased land. So is that land that council leases, such as Te Tokorangi Forest, or is that land that's leased by council to a third party, such as Springfield Golf Course?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's land that council owns that we lease exclusively to another organisation. So a good example of that is probably the youth centre. They currently lease the whole site, so it's, while they do provide some use, we don't have a level of control over the use of that open space that we would for non-leased land.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question? Do all of our will guide the new development, but most of our current open spaces, they comply, they sit comfortably under this policy?
So the next step, once the policy is adopted, is to take it and apply it to our existing network to ensure alignment, I guess, in terms of the provisions of the policy. We do have a lot of open space land, but we know that some of it probably isn't the best quality or provides the necessary recreation value that we would like to see. So that's really the development of a network plan, which is the next step.
So that's the next step, if I clarify. Mrs. Trumper?
Just a point of clarification. On page 19, and the staff recommendation, the wording is being included, additional funding will be sought from the general rate. Is this something new? And what is the normal process for these parks? As you say, the land is not always suitable for what it's been proposed for. So what type of funding in a general rate is, new, and what is, where is it heading? Is it going to be something that's held under consultation? Because I would have thought that the developer would have been contributing that land as opposed to the general ratepayer, for somebody down in Broadlands, for example, paying for some land up in, I'll say, Rotorua Road.
So that point is specifically related to financial contributions, which we take through the district plan on subdivision. So the rule requires 5% of the values of all properties within a subdivision to be provided as a financial contribution. In most instances, and just want to be clear that we're only starting to see some of those kind of bigger subdivisions coming through, so we're just starting to kind of work our way through that process. But generally, we would like to take land of suitable quality instead of a financial contribution in terms of cash. Sometimes there might be a small cash contribution that we can use to upgrade it. This is really just, I guess, if we wanted to provide an open space that was higher than the level of service, if the developer wanted to see that, but it would be a negotiation, really. That help? Yeah. I can't see that being something that happens very often.
base level of service policy attachment 2 is adopted with the amendments recommended by staff and included in attachment 1. So I'll move that. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mr. Thomas. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. Item number 7.2, Community Funding Investment Policy Review, consideration for long-term plan budget. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Your Worship. That the report, Community Funding Investment Policy Review, consideration for long-term plan budget be received. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Good morning. Kia ora kōrua. Going to overview the report for us. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, ko Rosemary Viskovich taku ingoa. My colleague Jill has done a lot of the work on this policy. We've had a community funding investment policy for a number of years, and we seek to keep improving it every few years when we review the policy based on previous learning and opportunities in the community. So Jill's going to present you today what is recommended to improve going forward on the various categories of grants we have, and some changes that we think would be better for our community and better for council.
Morena, everyone. I'm just going to do a quick synopsis basically on the paper. At the moment, Council has a variety of different funding pools that are available to the community. We have partnership agreements and community grants. Now, those two funding pools are 3 yearly grants. Organizations that get those agreements or grants get the funding for 3 consecutive years. It aligns with the long-term plan. The Neighbourhood Matching Fund, those funds are one-off, a bit more project-based. Te Rako Tupakari Fund is our COVID relief fund package. And then we also have funds that are given to the Geyser Community Foundation. Now, they help to administer community grants, and they also maintain the relationship with those community organizations over the 3 years. So they'll receive annual reporting, they'll answer questions and that sort of thing. So the key points around the policy amendments that we're recommending, one is around the integrated approach to all council funding. We're looking and we're requesting to regain administration of community grants. So previously, council had administered community grants. We worked alongside Geyser Community Foundation to take that role on. And I suppose there's a few learnings that we've gotten out of that. So we would be looking to reallocate the near $14,000 that we use to pay Geyser to redistribute and add into the community funding pool. Relationship management is key to moving forward. So the point being is that we've lost, or our relationship with those community groups that are getting funds through Geyser Community Foundation, we no longer have the same relationships that we had with those groups previously, because we would be checking in, we would receive their annual reports. When we're no longer doing that, we've noticed that those relationships have lessened. We also are suggesting that we lift the minimum level of community grants to range from $3,000 to $5,000. In the paper, it states that our community grants range at the moment between $1,000 and $5,000. The majority of applications that come through are for $5,000, and the average grant that they're getting is $1,500. And what we're looking at and we're putting to you is that what are the outcomes that you get when you get a $1,000 grant? And really, if organizations are seeking $1,000, there are other pots of funding where they can get that. So very often it would be much easier to get funding from a gaming trust for $1,000 versus coming to council. You would have better outcomes around the $3,000 to $5,000 range. And those organizations would be able to do more with that type of money. We've added community safety to the policy objectives. We've also added a few things around we've added some terminology and definitions in the policy. So for example, the Neighbourhood Matching Fund, we allow a umbrella organization or a fiscal sponsor. And so we've added some of those, the definitions in the policy, so it's much more clear so organizations understand that if you are a community group doing something like a community garden, then you potentially could partner with an organization like Mokoia Community Association to help umbrella the funds to come in. We've also added remove funding application alignment to the LTP process. As it stands, the policy states that organizations wanting a partnership agreement need to do it through a submission process through the LTP. That, to us, what we're saying is that we would prefer the application process to stand alone. The allocation of funds still fits within the LTP process, and that's on the next slide. So just to clarify that, the quantum is through the LTP process, and which we want to remain, but the application process we want to sit separately. Next step for this is that the amount of money going into these funding pools will come to you through the long-term plan, and you will make that decision there. So really what we're looking at, I suppose, around next steps and timeline is that once a decision comes out of these policy amendments, we will be looking at socializing the funding rounds and the funding pools with the community. We would then have the decision on the quantum, the amount of funds that are available to the community in the funding pools. And then we would be looking at the application process and the funding allocation. So the next 3 months are quite important, and around especially the communication and promotion. So we will look to have workshops. We'll be looking at our Facebook pages and our other communication avenues to ensure that the community are aware of the funding sources that are available and the funding pots that are available at the moment, and to encourage them to put in applications for partnership agreements and community grants. So partnership agreements are our large grants. The organizations that get that funding, it's between 10,000 and 50,000. So those are our substantial grants to community organizations. And the list of those organizations is attached in your paper. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll just take questions on, thank you. Yes. Your Worship.
Could you go back to the key recommendations? And that's groups that can do so much with really so little. So I really like that. I like the alignment too, but I wonder where you talk about relationship, how are you going to show that relationship? So with Bay Trust, Energy Trust, Geyser Foundation, how are we going to reflect that relationship? Because that's quite important to deliver our strategic outcomes.
Through you, Madam Chair. Very good question, and I suppose it's not written in the policy, but we are meeting, our local funders meet on a 6-weekly basis. So since COVID, myself and Rosemary meet alongside Rotorua Trust, DIA, Bay Trust. Geyser has come in on occasion, and just looking at those main funding sources that we're sitting together, we're talking also leveraging funding. So when applications are coming into the Tiraka Fund, often they've also gone into Rotorua Trust. We're talking to each other, leveraging the funding pool to ensure that there is support or added support to the applications.
And a slight anomaly, and I think it's right to bring it in back in-house so that you've got that coordination. There are bequests that the Office of the Mayor goes to a funding distribution round, and I wonder if they come in too. I do seek advice from you about, which of these applications are fitting our strategic outcomes, but I wonder if that just doesn't have a step prior to us looking at bequests. It's quite a substantial amount of money that's distributed every year.
Thank you.
It comes in the policy, I'm saying, as a front end.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you for the presentation, Rosemary and Jill. Just a question around the bringing the Geyser Foundation Putia back in-house. I accept the rationale. My question is, do we have the internal resource to manage the work that was done by Geyser Foundation, or do we have to take on new resource to do all that?
Thank you. That's part of our review, has been what we can do internally. So previously we did not have the administrative capacity to take this on, hence we did have those conversations with Geyser, and they have done a great job. But we do now have capacity in-house, and it also allows for near $14,000 to go back into the funding pool. So knowing that a lot of our community organizations have been hit especially hard by COVID, realizing that's not a huge amount of money, but every dollar counts. So, yeah. One other point I think to make around the policy, it's not an amendment, it's something that we did previously, but equity is a key part of all of the funding that we're distributing, and that's something we want to see improved. Looking at those who have received funding, and looking at those that are applying for funding, we want to ensure that there is a wide range of organizations, iwi, runanga, community organizations that are putting their hat in the ring to apply for council funding.
Thank you. That's a really important part of any distribution of grants, is that there is the equity lens always. Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in the policy, there wasn't a requirement that organisations have a charitable status, so they don't under your current distribution?
In the criteria of, I'll have to go through the application process, but the majority of our applications require charitable status or incorporated society status. There's nothing around businesses being able to apply, for example.
Yes, I thought the charitable status was a requirement just for granting. So just a follow-up question then is, are we actually putting more cost onto the organisations that are applying for funding, where I can see from the list of the community organisations that a lot of these organisations would also be funded on a quite regular basis by organisations like Bay Trust and the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust. And if you are meeting with them 6 weekly, would there be an opportunity for organisations to apply once rather than having to fill in forms for each of those organisations and for gaming trusts? So effectively you're multiplying their administration time and cost to apply for funding by having multiple organisations rather than one point of application.
That doesn't tend to be, Councillor Kaifong, I'm pretty aware of this because I sit on the Rotorua Energy Trust, but that doesn't usually happen these days. Usually if it's a small amount, then, and I'm referring here to the Rotorua Energy Trust, we just refer it straight back to the funders who give the smaller amounts. We don't tend to do those anymore. And that is because it is time consuming for the smaller, or for those applicants to have to constantly submit things. So we put those, or those applications tend to go out now, come back to what was Geyser for those small, particularly for the small amounts. So.
Through you, Madam Chair, also the fact that I think what I'm hearing is just creating an easier process for applying for funding rather than applying to 15 different sources. As an example, we are working alongside Rotorua Trust through Jackie, and there have been conversations around working in partnership on a process where you're going to get applications come through. We've had one that we're working on at the moment alongside Bay Trust. So we are open to that, as are the administrators of Rotorua Trust. So it's not, it is something that we're open to.
Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. I don't actually have a question, so perhaps I could wait for discussion, but I just want to signal that I do want to move an amendment because while I support everything on there, I do not support lifting the minimum level of community grants to 3,000, but happy to discuss that after councillors have had the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you. So noted. Mr. Bassini Tule.
Madam Chair, kia ora kōrua. Well done on all the mahi you've done. Epic effort. Te tātou, we love what you're doing with the integration, but when it comes to equity, we just want to make sure, or confirmation actually, that there is equitable participation and decision making, especially for rangatahi and te aroha. So,
kia ora, noted. And what we can be doing is we will, as we're working on this timeline and socializing the funding that's available, we'll be looking at our funding panels and the representation that is on there. So noted, and we'll have a conversation with Te Tato. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, then Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill and whānau up there. Tremendous job you guys are doing. And I see a lot of, look through the pages of the grants that are going out, and I see a lot of them coming to other trusts that I'm on. The question I've got is that addition of the community safety and the objectives of the policy, is that because of what has happened recently or what's happened during COVID?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's aligning it to the long-term plan and the vision and objectives and goals of Council. So just making sure that we have the opportunity for organisations that are aligning their work with the work that Council's doing to fit within the criteria.
And the other one, Madam, is last night I attended the Bay of Plenty Funders Forum, and it was held in Paingaroa Hall. And there were over 100 people there, so people are out there really looking for help and everything. And thank you for the thorough report here, because that's going to help as well. I'll have to catch up with you later and tell you about some of the new groups that have been even formed in the wider Bay of Plenty. It might be good for us, but kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Good Chair, through you. Thank you for this report. Very interesting. I notice on, first let me confirm that the 1.4 million in total of local community grants applies to your recommendations that you have up there, not just the Geyser Foundation.
Yes.
Everything.
Excellent. That's the first question. The second one is, I notice on the bottom of page 38 that the process that you're proposing to use, that'll become part of this policy, is that council officials will evaluate applications, work with a subcommittee of elected members to confirm recommendations, not to co-evaluate the recommendations. So I wondered, how did you come to this position on the relative roles of those engaged in governance and those engaged in management? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to answer that. The amount of, the quantity of applications we get and the size of the dossiers, I think Shirley was one of the people, and Phil previously have been on the board at subcommittee looking at those. There's a huge amount of reading to get through, and our sense was that it was staff's responsibility to make sure they'd really read through thoroughly and provided some analysis. It's certainly then up to the committee to, go through that, ask questions and so on, but there is a fair amount of reading involved. So our sense was that the staff responsibility to go through a lot of the detail and do some of the highlight things and make recommendations, but it was certainly open to lots of discussion and healthy debate, as I recall previously.
Thank you. That's actually what we used to have that was what we used to have in the past, and it was also because council had the opportunity to draw on the knowledge and networks that councillors have, and that was very, very helpful in those. So I'm pleased to see that is coming back. So I'm going to move on now to Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had one, and it was around the increasing community safety, and I wondered whether there was going to be any additional funding pool considered once the 500,000 for the community safety plan, whether that was coming into that or whether community safety was actually fitting in the current policy and that funding pool, really.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the community safety draft plan is out for consultation with the community at the moment. I think we talked in that around aligning our community grants with community safety as a key outcome. There isn't additional funding at this point divided up enough and to be able to say it's new grants for community safety. However, I think a number of the things that our organisations do critically are about community safety in a very broad sense. So I think it's really just around highlighting that, but at the moment there's not additional funds for community safety grants, but I guess we could look at that when feedback comes back from the LTP on the community safety plan.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, just wanted to know whether I'm in line with what I'm going to ask. For example, if we look at the Te Rako to Pakari Fund, and if Mamaku, for example, as a neighbourhood, if they, because in the LTP we've heard what they had to say last night, but if they came up with the idea that if they would be a bit more resilient under the principles of how we're matching this fund, that if they were given, say, a mow-on rider or something, and they would employ 2-3 people on a volunteer basis or something, no?
That was a long-term plan discussion that we're yet to deliberate on by June. Love the idea, but it's sort of outside of this.
It is outside of this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I take it back. But if we don't go on to the long-term plan, so what I'm trying to ask is, if they did come up with a matching idea fund, they could apply for something like this?
Through you, Madam Chair. Any charitable community organisation can apply to, that is providing service to the Rotorua community, can apply to our funding.
Or non-charitable?
Yes, there has been a move away in some funding organisations from charitable trusts, particularly for the smaller community applications or group applications.
So we have a fiscal sponsor so they could apply through a partner to apply for funding, and that's defined in our policy. That's a new addition. The other thing I suppose to note is, again, to align applications with criteria, and the Te Rako to Pakari Fund salaries, wages, anything along those lines are not covered in that fund.
Thank you. Well, thank you for those questions. I am going to open it up for discussion as well, and I will come straight to you, Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't want to get in the way of the question, so I appreciate your indulgence. And it was just my concern around increasing to $3,000, because as you can see in the report, and as it mentions on page 38, the average grant was $1,500. And when you look at the organisations that have requested that funding, it is our organisations like kindergartens, community patrols, youth and education trusts, or sports groups. And having an understanding and experience on being on funding panels at a local, regional and national level, I understand the importance that even a couple $100 or $1,500 can make to these organisations, and they won't, basically what they're after is significantly under $3,000. However, I see that there is still real importance for our community organisations, and my key concern at this time, while that may have made sense 1 year ago, after COVID-19 and with the continued economic impacts of COVID-19 on our community in particular, I do worry that those smaller groups will miss out on those small pieces of equipment or funding that could significantly help their organisation or their trust. So I just wanted to share that with the councillors for them to consider as well. I do think that in time, once we recover economically, that we could relook at this, but in this times I would not support it raising to $3,000. I do very much support all of the other recommendations strongly, but I would like to suggest if we could take the points in 3 separate points and would like to put on the table an amendment on that point 2 that it is adopted with the amendments recommended by staff, excluding the increase to $3,000. So I will leave that to my elected members, but again, just my concern that that money, while small to councillors with the amount of money that we deal with, is hugely significant to our small organisations. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. I tend to agree with your rationale there. But that would mean perhaps just merely the status quo remains. Thank you. I'll just take some advice.
Confirm there. So, Councillor Tapsell, the staff recommendation is currently up there. From the sounds of it, you're asking to make a change to that recommendation. So you'd like to then be a mover. Would you suggest what the wording that you would like to have there in point 2, please?
Just change the full stop to a comma and say excluding the increase, excluding the change of community grants funding range to 3,000, 5,000. Yep.
Yep.
So excluding the change to community grants funding range to 3,000.
So just to cut in there, sorry, Councillor Tapsell. So that would be you would support the status quo?
Yes.
Which is a funding level of 1 to 5.
Oh, yes,
Yep.
yes,
Yep.
yes,
Cool.
thank you.
All right. So if we just, is adopted with the amendments recommended by staff. Happy with, are you happy with that wording? Or?
You could say excluding the change to community grant funding range from 3,000 to 5,000, which will remain the same, perhaps.
I'd like to second the motion because I also have an issue because just sort of butting in here a little. Any organisation applying to council for funding wants to know council are supporting them. And this is council's one opportunity to actually put its name to supporting an organisation, whether it's $1,000 or $5,000. It's irrelevant. It's the application process, and I think we need to keep that funding, I suppose, bookend 1 to 5.
So just to confirm, we do have a mover and a seconder for that, the amendment that's just been made there. So we can now discuss that. It's open for discussion. And yes, Councillor Maxwell.
Question-wise, there is another fund that we have here at council, and that's for small grants. That's the Creative New Zealand one, and that's held twice a year. So the question is to the staff members, would that be one to cover all the smaller grants? Because I understand and see where you're going with lifting the bar a little bit. It does help, but can you tell me if the Creative New Zealand Fund itself, which is administered by another committee on council here?
So that fund is distributed by Arts and Culture, and I think Julie Parsons is the council officer that helps to administer that fund. And that the criteria for that fund is very specific to arts and culture. And I suppose really our neighbourhood matching fund grant process is a very simple and easy process. It's highly accessed. And that seems to be the fund that our community organisations are accessing for those smaller pots of funding or the one-off bits that they need to get them through, especially for projects.
Thank you. Can you just confine your comments, please, to the motion up there? Thank you. Councillor McPherson. A discussion.
I have a separate issue to raise, not related to this amendment.
Right.
Thank you.
Sorry? Yes, we're discussing this. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Talking to the amendment, I'm in two minds, but I'm actually strongly convinced or in support of the comment of Mrs. Trumper It is incredibly important to small organisations seeking funding that there is community support from Rotorua Lakes Council. That's something that any applicant can leverage, and it carries a lot of weight. So even if it's only $1,000, that will tend to be the lever to get matched funding from another funder, and so I would support the amendment.
Actually, it's not an amendment. There's just been a change made, and it's been moved and seconded, the change. So it's not an amendment, but that is what the discussion is now. So I just want to make sure, Councillor McPherson, that this is what we're discussing. So there's nothing else going to be introduced. This is what we're discussing. This is the motion.
Then can I address the other issue that I'm concerned about?
No, this is
Not
actually
this time.
This is the motion that we're discussing at present.
That's 1, 2 and 3.
Yes, or 2 and 3.
Then what opportunity will I have to raise a issue related to this entire motion?
Yes, just this discussion.
This discussion.
And we'll come back to this other
Yes.
issue. Thank you.
I'll come back and I'll take anything else then. Thank you. Your Worship?
Yes, I don't support that at all. I think I've been on so many funding application bodies, and there's a natural practice. If they come in asking for 3,000, they get 1,500, and it's how we make the pūtea go further. When staff put forward a recommendation that actually they've assimilated all the criteria and what they want to spend it on, the $1,000 gives them nothing. And I agree with Mrs. Trumper and you all about leverage so that you can go to others. But it's incredibly hard to put forward an application for a small amount and then not be able to do much with it, and then have to come back with accountability for how that funding was spent. We're talking about tiny amounts here, and I like us to spread the pie. If you're looking about a dispersal model, I think that's got another strategy policy decision, but I cannot support that. I've seen the benefits, and I get around, like you all, to so many community functions where I see what they've done with their funding application from council. Play centre that's been able to put in a little kitchen or little tiny things, but everything costs more. And so I think reducing it and keeping it to 3,000 rather than accepting the recommendation to take it to 5 is very, very limiting. And then they've got to go to more work to leverage to get, as you say, cornerstone funding from council really matters. But then they've got to go out and go to more work to get applications to other funders. And we're trying to make it simple. We're trying to make it so that they can do something.
Keep it brief, please, Your Worship. Keep it brief.
All right, I thought I had 5 minutes.
No,
okay,
no.
Sure, well that's enough.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. I want to make it clear again that these are the recommendations that we are now talking about. The motion, yes, 2 and 3 actually. So I want to, so I'm coming back to you again, Councillor McPherson, because if your question is going into something different, I'm not going to allow it. So you had ample opportunity prior to this to ask any questions of clarification or discussion, and you failed to do so.
Through you, Chair, I did ask for clarification on the boundaries between the various roles, and my comment follows from that. But if I could comment now?
Thank you.
Thank you. My concern hangs on the phrase, the statement that that officials are going to regain administration. The catch here is that administration is variously defined.
Thank you. You have mentioned that before, and that's not going to be discussed now. You did mention it before.
And I wanted to discuss the implications of that.
Sorry, we've moved on from that. We have moved on from that, and we heard an explanation from Rosemary, and that should have been adequate. So that was adequate. So I'm now going to
That's wrong.
I'm
That's
sorry,
quite
are
wrong.
there any further? Yes, you'd like to. Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, just perhaps to be very clear, which will remain the same, $1,000 to $5,000.
That's right.
Is
That's
that
right.
okay?
That's it. Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, I am going to put 2 and with a mover and seconder for 3 as well. Was that? Thank you, Councillor Trumper. Sorry, Mrs. Trumper and then Councillor Tapsell. So both 2 and 3. You're all right for 3 as well. Thank you. Yes.
Missed that. Councillor Tapsell, are you now accepting that it's 3 to 5,000?
No.
No.
No. So do we?
What?
We've got 3 to 5, and then we've got which will remain. Doesn't quite make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
So we'll just would we just get that wording right, please? Status quo, actually, excluding the community funding grant range.
Can I just clarify that the council Tapsell's just put in which will remain the same. You could put in semicolon $1,000 to $5,000. So the effect of this is effectively opening the range up of the applications or grants that can be provided.
That's different. Yeah.
Was your intention? Thank you. So we've got it clear here.
Wouldn't we take away the 3 to 5 and just put in from 1 to 5? It's currently up to 3.
No, the recommendation that is in the staff report was for a new range of $3,000 to $5,000, and that's what Councillor Tapsell is actually saying, that is to be excluded, and then saying that the amount available, the range available, will remain the same, which is 1 to 5,000. So the councillor's proposal, I think, is actually correct.
I get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have had sufficient discussion on that. There's no further discussion? No, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to, with my glasses. Oh gosh, now, fine, thank you. I'm going to have to read that. So we've had a mover and a seconder. So point 2, that the committee recommends to council that the draft community funding investment policy, attachment 2, with the tracked changes version, is adopted with the amendments recommended by staff, excluding the change to community grant funding range from $3,000 to $5,000, which will remain the same, $1,000 to $5,000. 3, that the committee recommend to council that the Te Rākau to Pakari Fund close in September 2021, 1 year after commencement. So it's been moved and seconded, and thank you for the discussion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor McPherson. Sorry? Thank you. I am going to we'll just take a 10-minute break, tea break, councillors, and then we'll resume our meeting. Thank you. the Rotorua Lakes Council's Waste Assessment 2021. Oh, sorry, Stavros. Just take your time. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the motion that the report, Rotorua Lakes Council's Waste Assessment 2021 be received? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. So it's been moved and seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Good morning. Morena Korua.
Good morning, Morena. Chair, sorry, apologies. I will introduce Dr. Prashant again with regards to this report. I won't say much. I'll leave the report as read, other than just to reiterate that the report you've got in front of you with regards to the Rotorua Waste Assessment 2021, it is a statutory step towards the next step, which is the creation and the review of our waste management and minimization plan, which takes place every 6 years. In other words, this assessment report, you can see it as an intelligence report evaluating what we do right now, what's our waste composition, what are the trends, what do we need to do in the future, and how we're going to about it in our waste minimization plan. So our future action plan will be embodied into the waste management plan that will come to you in the near future, in the conclusion of the 6-year period. We are required to undertake this assessment as a statutory requirement, and the risk is that if we don't undertake it in a prescribed way and the Council does not adopt it, then our waste minimization funds we receive might be at risk. So me and Prashad are quite happy to take any questions arising from this report. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. So I'm going to ask for questions. Any questions? Mr. Berryman Kim?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And look, thank you for your report and the comprehensive report. I've got 2 questions. I'll leave it to the committee to see if the first one is actually of relevance. My question was, we all know the issues we have in terms of the practice of fly tipping, and I'm unsure as to what the impact of this will actually have on that. So I'll just leave that there, and whether that's an appropriate question to be asked now or not, I'm not too sure. My second question actually specifically, within the documents, it outlines the 9,500 tonnes of bio-solid waste, including that from the wastewater treatment plant. But then the document, for me, is remarkably light on what we do with that. It heavily focuses in on the rest of the waste. So I'm interested in knowing the treatment for the, what I think is 9,500 tonnes of biosolid waste from the wastewater treatment plant. Where does it go, and is it disposed of in a culturally appropriate manner? I think I recall that it's trucked away, but if I could have confirmation, please.
Thank you, Eugene. To the first question with regards to what we call fly tipping, we call it illegal dumping, obviously. There are 2 elements to that. One, of course, it's the element of community irritations, environmental vandalism, and really, a complete disregard, of community norms by people. And I think we need to continue to educate and inform and facilitate as much as we can to minimize it. I want to say 2 things about it. One is the fact that we are not unique to that. This is not a phenomenon that afflicts Rotorua alone. It's a phenomenon that afflicts every urban society. I don't have all the answers, of course, but at the end of the day, it's we need to persevere and continue to inform people that there are alternative and viable ways to dispose of their waste. In terms of the quantity, of course, on average, we encounter about 100 tons of fly tipping or illegal dumping every year. That's in the context of about 13,000 tons of waste to generate from households. But a very small percentage, of the total waste. Irritating as it might be, and frustrating and annoying, at the end of the day, the question is that how much energy and effort you put into that in terms, of the comparative normal waste management approaches you're taking. We will, though, be addressing it into our waste minimization plan, as they come later on. And sometimes we undertake actions that are disproportionate to the financial benefit from it, for other reasons. And I think eventually we want to do a waste minimization plan. You have to consider as to what kind of direction you may want to instigate or provide for us to follow in that respect. Our biosolids, it doesn't long history, but at the end of the day, the treatment of our wastewater generates close to about 10,000 tons of biosolids each year. About 23% of that is solids. The other 77% is water, basically. That is transferred on a daily basis to Kaurau, which is vermicomposting plant, EcoCast. Is mixed with green waste and other organic waste, and at the moment, under a National Environmental Protection Agency consent, are applied to farm. So basically, is recycled, is put to beneficial use, into the farm, into farmland. Again, you received from us, from Dr. Prashant, about a week ago, a presentation about the consultation process we'll be undertaking with regards to the food, organic, and green waste management for next year, next financial year. We'll start a consultation, which is a result of our waste minimization assessment. And of course, if that progresses, then we will explore together with EcoCast and together with Trinity, who have the ongoing responsibility right now for managing biosolids, to see whether we can establish some local beneficial use of biosolids together with food waste and green waste, with the involvement of appropriate interested parties. But all that will come out of the consultation process, and we'll build a business case, and we'll provide for you options to consider in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? And yes, Mrs. Trumper.
Thank you. I've actually just got a couple really around one point. One of them is around the legal framework in reducing waste. How much work is local government through LGNZ actually targeting central government to reduce packaging, to actually reduce the amount of waste that is going to our landfills? Because, I mean, the consumer is actually being asked to pay for something that the manufacturer has produced, and I think we need to be pushing back somehow that way. And I have a second question, which I'll ask soon.
Thank you for the question. In the past 1 year, a lot of different things have happened in this regards. So you may be aware that New Zealand government is set to ban all polystyrene packaging in New Zealand. So we've got plastic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 is set to be banned. 6 is set to be banned, which is polystyrene. 3, which is PVA, is set to be banned. And so what you will be left with is plastic 1, 2, 5, which for Rotorua currently make up over 80% of total plastics, and which can be recycled at least 3 to 4 times. So that's one big step. In addition to that, government last year released a plastic consultation document, and there are a number of steps listed there. The document, if I remember correctly, was released by Prime Minister's office, and that is serving as a guiding document. In addition to that, we and most of the councils in New Zealand are members of Waste Mints, and Waste Mints is lobbying government to bring more stringent regulations to manage plastic problem. Thank you.
So that it's just sort of trying to, obviously streamline the whole thing so that the consumer isn't ending up paying for something for 5 years that should be introduced now. But anyway, so getting back to my second point, on table 4, which is on page 33, I read here that there is, for your green organic and food organic, you're looking at weekly collections and rubbish moving out to fortnightly. How is that going to be communicated or consulted within the rural community that currently are paying for a service weekly and not in line for this food organic or green organic waste.
Thank you, Ms. Trumper. Can I sort of clarify that what is articulated in page 33 here is just a range of options. In presenting our business case last week to the O&M committee with regards to the consultation next first financial year, we said that we built up a business case which says, well, the possible costs of a particular approach are X, the possible benefits are Y, and there is a BCR coming out of that. One of them, we use the model to say, well, if we change the frequency of collection from A to Z, or A to B, that will, give us some materials. We have not actually arrived at a solid proposal yet. These are possible options, and certainly, as you rightfully outlined there's a lot of work need to be done with the community to explore the pros and cons for this option. So I don't want anyone to take it for granted that because we're talking about it in this as an option is really a recommendation. It's not anywhere near that yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Donaldson?
Indicate I'm happy to move part 2 of the recommendation, Madam Chair, when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. You're seconding it? Question, certainly, yes.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I was just trying to check that I didn't miss anything, and it may be outside of the scope, but just a question around when we look at the significant events and conferences that we have here in Rotorua, which are often in council facilities or reserves, and whether that fell into the strategy or not, but in terms of collection of waste or even of organic waste and recycling at these events, and whether that fits into the scope of this strategy or other. And just raise that because obviously significant amounts of rubbish are collected there, and it would be great if we could signal in our strategies that we want to be better in those areas as well.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. We currently have Rotorua's solid waste bylaw, which requires all event organizers to prepare an event waste management and minimization plan. And we have just started discussions with all the events team on how can we enforce that. So we are looking into creating a guiding document for event organizers, and so that they have a template, and because most of the event organizers are not an expert in recycling or composting. So we are looking at how to make it easier for them, and also to see that it doesn't cost them as much. So that will definitely be a part of our next waste management and minimization plan.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrua. Yes, a comprehensive report, kotaku, and just following on from Councillor Tapsell's comment around recycling at events, how can you guarantee that there won't be cross-contamination irrespective of the various receptacles? Because that would be my concern.
You're right about that. So a few weeks back, we were working with Night Market team, and this was the major concern, that we can provide bins and we can recycle stuff, but how do you control people? And it's no different from the problem that we are facing with curbside recycling. Despite all the communication plans and several reminders, we continue to have over 20% contamination. So to start with, I think with all the bins, there should be some volunteers managing and educating it. So what we are doing we are integrating event waste management with our waste education programs, so that we don't just leave event people alone, we help them educate people in the markets and in other events, so that serves both the purposes. Thank you.
So are there any further points for discussion? Mr. Tooley? Senior Tooley, yes.
Kia ora. A bit of a out the box type thinking. Do you have incentives for waste minimisation? So overseas, you can take plastic bottles, stick it in a machine, get credit, $1, and so you incentivise recycling. Has the council looked into any incentivisation of e-waste or incentivisation of plastic bottles? Or
Can we just make sure that we are making our comment, that our comments are relevant to the report that we've actually got on the table, which is assessment. So if you choose not to answer that, that's fine, because I want to make sure that our questions are relevant to the report that we've got on the table.
I can answer that question. Thank you. So what you just described is known as a container deposit scheme. It's widely practiced in Europe, and in New Zealand it has been debated for a very long time. And last week we had a discussion among TAs of Bay of Plenty and Waikato, and we are making a submission to the government. Government is actively looking at bringing some of the things which are most common litter objects, for example, drink cans and bottles, into the container deposit scheme. So still no specifics are out, but government will put a refundable tax on all these products. When people return, they'll get the money back. I think in terms of councils doing it, it's very difficult because it will require significant infrastructure and administrative cost, behind these schemes. So, but central government has indicated that this will be coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any discussion? Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick comments as the mover. So delighted with the objectives at 6.3 in the assessment, which includes the issues raised by colleagues, the increased community awareness on waste minimisation and diversion, and increase the number of zero waste events in Rotorua. And I just give a plug for Crankworks there, Madam Chair. The last time we held that in 2019, a big focus on diversion from landfill of waste at that event. And in fact, we had Scion exhibiting at the expo as well on creative uses of waste and other initiatives that they're undertaking, and it would be great to see some community awareness education at the next Crankworks in November, but I'm happy to support, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mrs. Trumper?
Sorry, it's probably not really relevant, but I really am. I want to know how council can actually introduce the bylaw, following on from Councillor Tapsell's comment around waste minimisation with building waste that either goes to our landfill or sadly was dumped in our rural community. And we need to start either be pushing back at council on our building regulations, at government, and making sure that there is a waste minimisation, or that they actually have to pay some kind of levy to actually control the amount of waste that leaves those sites.
Thank you. That doesn't require an answer for this bit, but thank you. Any further points for discussion? Thank you very much. Thank you. We do have a mover and a seconder. That the committee recommends to council to approve Rotorua's Waste Assessment 2021, Attachment 1. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 7.4, Statements of Intent for Council-controlled organisations for the year commencing the 1st of July 2021. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, that the report be received? Thank you, Councillor Kaifong. Thank you, Your Worship. It's been moved and seconded that the report, Statement of Intent for Council-controlled organisations for the year commencing the 1st of July 2021 be received. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Good morning, JP.
Morning.
Morning.
Just as way of introduction to this report, which obviously has quite a few pages of attachments with the draft SOIs there, really this is a continuation of the process that we have with our CCOs. So obviously we have the three. We give them a letter of expectation, usually in late November, early December, and that forms the basis for their boards to go away and prepare a draft SOI, which has to be lodged with Council by the 1st of March. Now, in getting hold of that draft SOI, the Council has the opportunity to make some comments on it, and the boards of those CCOs must consider those comments around their draft and then deliver a completed SOI to Council by the end of June so that it can be adopted. So obviously the SOI is an important document for the CCOs. They give us an opportunity to put a public accountability document out there for our community to see where our funding goes into those separate organisations and the boards that run them. It provides you an opportunity when you see these draft documents to influence their direction. Again, there are independent organisations that we fund, but also they provide a really important basis for accountability both to the community, but to the directors on their board, and also from your perspective as a shareholder. So again, you can see here that we've been talking with the CCOs for a number of months, and we see some good alignment between what we've asked them to do in this letter of expectations through into these draft documents. So really this is that opportunity. If you feel there's any other comments we need to pass through to those CCOs, this is the opportunity to do that. I'd also highlight that certainly for Infracore and for RED, the impacts of COVID have been significant, so they've had to be quite adaptive in their business approaches going forward. And also, certainly for Infracore, they've tried to increase their emphasis as a social enterprise. And again, that's related to some of the specific projects that we've sought to involve them in as far as our economic recovery funding has been concerned. And finally, the regional airport, also significantly affected. I shouldn't have left them out of that trifecta of impacts. They're certainly looking at, with our support through the economic recovery funding, for alternative funding sources from their site as well. So again, all of those CCOs have picked up those changes, which are significant and will continue to impact on them through this coming year and probably successive years as well. So happy to answer off any questions or receive any comments on those draft SOIs.
Thank you very much, JP. And obviously, you know, we are all aware that they have been impacted, the CCOs have been impacted, and so we're hoping that recovery will come, if not within the next 18 months, then pretty soon thereafter. So thank you for that. Questions, councillors, relevant to the report that you've got on the table? Thank you, Your Worship.
These are getting much more finesse than they were when we first set up the CCO, so that's great to see. My issue with Infracore, point 2 about emergency response, it's also that overlap. You've talked about 24 maintenance call-outs and resources drawn upon instantly, but they also went out of the way to provide some services. If they saw someone struggling, they did stop and help. So it's not just call-outs according to the schedule of service. I think it's going beyond the call of service that we recognised after the floods. And also COVID at that time. So I just think that needs to be elaborated a bit more about flexibility of service delivery. I loved hearing them say that, you know, someone was struggling with their shed, so they got out of their truck and went in and helped them. And these were people really distressed. So you hear these good things, but it's an overlay, really. It's not prescribed in a schedule, but in emergency we sanction that. We say that's good. We want that. So it is a bit of an elaboration of point 2 for Infracore, because we're going to get other events like this.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, those additional things that from time to time they're called upon or take the initiative to undertake.
They just do it.
They just do it. That's quite right. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, JP, it's just a comment on page 88, the table for performance targets, and number 3 is consolidated KPI scoring parks and open spaces. I'm assuming that open spaces incorporate cemeteries, but just as a trustee on Kauai, I know how passionate people are about the cemetery that's maintained by Infracore, and I just heard some feedback from Her Worship about Mamaku as well in terms of cemetery. So if it could, I guess, say open spaces including cemeteries, just to give the emphasis, because I think our community are very passionate about their cemeteries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berriman-Kemp?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and look, thanks for the comprehensive SOIs. I guess I have two questions. One, I think, is for the overall, well, no, actually both are for this committee to consider, so I'll roll with both of those. My first question is that when I went through the SOIs, I know it was only the Rotorua Economic Development one that actually mentioned the Te Arawa Vision 2050 document. And actually, if you'll indulge me, I wonder if that's one of the reasons why I see a dissonance between one of the stated objectives in the airport SOI, outlining that they acknowledge the treaty relationship, but actually the staff assessment, which comes up later, clashes with that in terms of what the needs of that board are. And so my first question is there a reason why the Te Arawa Vision 2050 document, in terms of alignment, is not included in the CCO SOIs with the exception of RED? And as an extension to that, I must say it is somewhat disappointing because actually when I go through the rest of the documents that we've received today, it's not in any of them either. So that's my first question. My second question is just raising, I note John McRae is a chair on 2 of the 3 CCOs, and I know John incredibly competent, but I do wonder about having one person being chair of 2 out of 3 CCOs. So I have 2 questions.
The first one, and it should come with the apology, that is an oversight. So we had feedback that we needed to have Te Arawa 2050 recognised, and we were particularly careful making sure that was stated for the RED SOI. But you're absolutely correct, it should also have been indicated and recognised with the other 2 CCOs as well. So I've picked up that as a point that needs to be fed back to those 2 groups.
Point of order, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just the one about individual appointments, I think that should come up in confidential where we're looking at board appointments.
Thank you, that should be. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor McPherson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got 4 suggestions. The first one is on para 412. There's reference to a specific project not public announced. Apart from the grammar, it's a little difficult to expect support for something which is not yet in the public domain. So I imagine that's being planned for. The second suggestion is the long-term balance between social and technical services of Infracore is something that should be usefully clarified in an SOI. The third suggestion is that the airport I'm referring to, the capex over 4.26 over 3 years is solely to do with maintenance, replacement and upgrades, but there's no specific action yet planned with regard to the commercialisation of land. And I raise that because I can recall 3-4 years ago promises being made annually about the commercialisation of land. It's time for some action in that area, I would suggest. The fourth and final suggestion is that others have picked up the fact that that RED is acutely aware, the chair of RED in particular is acutely aware, and he's described publicly and very accurately the fundamental changes to our economy in recent times, and this appears to be at odds with the business as usual philosophy presented in their SOI. There's some dissonance there. I draw that to your attention, and I'll leave that with you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those points. Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to signal that I was happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Further questions or just Discussion? Oh, thank you. Second. It's been seconded. Thank you. Discussion? Carl? Then thank you. Well, then we do have a mover and a seconder that the committee recommends to Council to submit the agreed comments on the draft statements of intent for Infracore Limited, Rotorua Regional Airport Limited and Rotorua Economic Development Limited. We've had a mover and a seconder. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Thank you. Resolution to go into public excluded, and the reasons are protect the privacy of natural persons, commercial sensitivity, maintain legal professional privilege. So thank you. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. So it's been moved and seconded that we move into public excluded session. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Thank you. Carried.